Okay, good. Thank you. Happy Pandava Nirjala Ekadasi, everybody. Looks like the ladies outnumber the men today, by far. The flight was delayed because they had equipment check and took a while. So I was thinking, I'll have a nice long kirtan today. And we made it safely, that's the good part. I was thinking today, to end this evening, to discuss the disappearance day. Yesterday was the disappearance day of Baldeva, Vidyabhushana. And this evening, Romapada Swami was her appearance day yesterday. So we'll just speak about those two personalities for the subject matter. We owe something very special to Baldeva. That's one of the reasons I wanted to speak about him. Because probably you've noticed, but if you haven't, the dedication page, it's got just the whole page. It's just this dedication to Srila Baldeva Vidyabhushana, Prabhupada's commentary, who presented so nicely the Govinda Bhashya commentary on Vedanta philosophy. In a private discussion, as far as I understand the context, Prabhupada revealed something about Baldeva and how Baladeva's commentary carried him across the Atlantic Ocean. He was residing in Vrindavan by the arrangement of the Goswami of the Radharaman temple. Vishwambar Goswami was the current Goswami at that time. Now his son is, because Vishwambar departed. But Prabhupada had developed a very affectionate relationship with Vishwambar Goswami. Vishwambar Goswami is one who oversaw the installation of Krishna Balaram, Radha Shyamasundar, and Gaurnitai, because amongst the Goswamis of Vrindavan, he was regarded as the superior amongst them all. So he had friendships with everybody. And one of his friendships was with the Goswami who was responsible for the Radha Damodar temple. So on his own initiative, he made arrangement for Srila Prabhupada with that Goswami of the Radha Damodar temple to have those two rooms. And Prabhupada worked out a written lease agreement with the Goswami, and there he resided. And it was in those two rooms for a number of years that Srila Prabhupada was preparing for Mission Impossible. I mean, he didn't use that language, but that's how he considered it, that the order of Bhaktisiddhanta was astounding, something more than he felt he had the wherewithal to do. One man to go to the Western world and bring the message of Lord Chaitanya. But it wasn't just Bhaktisiddhanta's will. It was something that Bhaktisiddhanta had gathered from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, And Bhaktivinoda Thakur gathered it from the writings and teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers. He wanted that the chanting of the holy name be heard in every town and village of the world. And a way to begin that, Bhaktivinoda Thakur envisioned, was if the English-speaking parts of the world, because at the time of Bhaktivinoda, the British Empire was vast, and English was the predominant language. So the English-speaking parts of the world was the British Empire. And wherever else, English was the primary language. And it wasn't that Bhaktisiddhanta's request of Srila Prabhupada was exclusive to Srila Prabhupada. Some persons may have that idea. He singled him out. But it was a pervasive desire, a vision, part of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's vision, part of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's vision. It must be done. And so it was spoken widely. Maybe some of you have read the brilliant article that Rabindra Prabhu wrote on the meaning of founder Acharya, and being the scholar, PhD scholar that Rabindra Prabhu is, he wanted not just an armchair idea. He wanted the written scriptural reference for how Prabhupada came up with this unique title. Founder is English and Acharya is Sanskrit, and he put the two together. Founder Acharya. So Rabindra had an idea, an inspiration, a clue. It seemed to him that whatever Prabhupada did came from Bhaktisiddhanta. So he researched and researched and researched, and one of the things that this major launching of a visit to England by two of Bhaktisiddhanta's prominent sannyasis, very scholarly, very impressive in their demeanor. He was waiting, Bhaktisiddhanta was waiting and waiting for a book that's about that thick in English for the people of England. The title of the book being Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because during his father's time, in 1896, there was a little pamphlet, or not pamphlet, a little booklet, 86 pages, small paper, kind of like our small book size, of book distribution size. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his life and precepts. And it was two parts. The first half was a description of Mahaprabhu's life and his little summary of what happened during his lifetime. And then the precepts part was these 10 essential teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Dasa Mula Tattva, he called it. And the booklet went to intellectuals, went to universities all over the world out of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's pocket. He paid for the printing and paid for the postage and sent it because his vision was at least scholarly people in the world should know who is Lord Chaitanya and what are his teachings. And he passed that inspiration on to his son, who wanted not just an 86-page little booklet, but a several hundred-page, full-sized book written by a professor, disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta, who was a professor in a university in Odisha. Professor Sanyal is his name. And he worked and worked and worked and worked and worked and worked and, took longer, because writing sometimes takes longer than what you want it to. So that the whole mission was held up waiting for that book, because Bhaktisiddhanta wanted that book to give to the educated people. Impressive in its language, in its detail, in its comprehensive explanation, who was Lord Chaitanya. And part of the Who was Lord Chaitanya section gave an explanation of the Gaudiya Mat. And twice in the literature, Rabindra found that there is this term, founder acharya, where Professor Sanyal identifies Bhaktisiddhanta for the, as far as Rabindra's research could find, the first and the only time, founder acharya, but never officially did Bhaktisiddhanta go by that title. Rabindra's intuitive understanding was that was a title meant for the fulfillment of this vision of bringing Krishna consciousness to the West. Because so he sent these two sannyas disciples that came back empty-handed, unsuccessful. But so the instruction that Prabhupada was given was to make it happen. And because Bhaktisiddhanta, when he sent those two sannyasis, it was with financing taken from each of the 64 mats. And some of those mats are very small, but some are more substantial. And the funding for these two sannyasis was to come from everybody. It was a collective effort. And so they had support, but Prabhupada didn't have support. So there he was, living in the Radha Damodar temple, a sannyasi with, it was enough of a challenge to print Back to Godhead fortnightly and the other hardcover books eventually. So he started printing the Bhagavatam volumes in 3 parts. So he was writing his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, which he had a plan, once reaching America, to have it printed in America. Find somebody who had the financial means and print it. So while he was preparing his commentary, Prabhupada describes this, as far as I understand, not a lecture, but a private conversation. When he was preparing that commentary, when he came to Bhagavad Gita 2:41, you're familiar, the Vyavasayatmika Bodhir Ekeha Kurunandana, that verse. He came across the statement in Baladev Vidyabhushana's commentary that said how to develop that Vyavasayatmika Bodhi capacity was, it's bestowed upon Krishna to one who takes the instruction of the spiritual master as one's life and soul. You read carefully in the purport of 241, it's there. He doesn't attribute it to Baladev. But Prabhupada said in this room conversation that commentary of Baladev struck his heart like a thunderbolt. And he knew he could no longer hesitate, because he was hesitating, feeling Vaishnava sentiments. I'm not qualified. But I must. Not qualified, but I must. He said it catapulted me across the Atlantic Ocean. Just those words. And therefore, dedication to Baladev Vidyabhushana. And mentioned is not his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, but his commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Probably one of the things that all of even our newer devotees know is that Vyasadeva, after compiling, this function of Vyasadeva is a function that happens at the end of every Dwapara Yuga before the beginning of Kali Yuga. It's a post, and different persons occupy that post in each of the Yuga cycles. And his name Veda Vyasa indicates he takes the one Veda and divides it into 4. Is compared to a king that has a big treasury. And somebody is given the assignment by the king, can you separate the diamonds and put them over here, and the rubies and put them over there, and the emeralds, and just divide it into... So the division is not creative writing, it's just according to category. And that's what he did. And after taking the one Veda and dividing it into 4, he summarized. This was his own writing, the Vedanta Sutra. So because it's in sutra or little codes form, it requires a commentary to understand it or unpack it. And the oldest of those commentaries, unfortunately, was Shankaracharya. And following Shankaracharya came over the next 300 years, the 4 sampradayas that are mentioned in Padma Purana, Madhva being the last of the 4. So those commentaries they help establish the authenticity of the sampradaya. Say it the opposite. Without a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, the sampradaya isn't established. It's not authenticated. But, although initiated by, within the Madhva line, Bhakti, by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was initiated within the Madhva line. Ishwar Puri was initiated by Madhavendra Puri in the Madhva line. His teachings were some elements of different emphasis, and the form of worship was different than Madhva. For example, in Udupi, the main place, there are 9 main temples. Each of the deity, there's no goddess of fortune. It's Udupi Krishna doesn't have Radha by his side. And the understanding is the goddess of fortune is within. Something like Mahavishnu, Rama Devi is within. We don't see her. But so when you worship Udupi Krishna, you're worshipping the goddess of fortune within, along with Udupi Krishna. That's the understanding. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers, understanding his mood, they established Radha Krishna, just like, for example, the deity of Govindaji was found in a very interesting way by Rupa Goswami. There was no Radha, just Govindaji. And there's a long history, which I'm not going to go into now because of time. But Lord Nityananda's wife, Janava, she arranged for deity of Radha to be by the side of Govindaji. And she was topmost authority following Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda, along with, of course, Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. So Radha Krishna worship was different than the worship in Madhva's line. So the same essential teachings and some differences. The differences help establish the authority of differences of worship, because worship has to be supported by scripture, not by whim. So there was no commentary on Vedanta Sutra by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's line, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu understood and expressed that the commentary of Vedanta Sutra by the author, Vyas, is done by the author, Vyas. And after Vyas wrote Srimad Bhagavatam, Sridhar Swami wrote a commentary. That's a whole other long historical description. Lord Chaitanya accepted the authority of Sridhar Swami's commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, not Vedanta Sutra, but Srimad Bhagavatam. So Bhagavatam is Vyasa's commentary, and Sridhar Swami's is the commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. And that was it. There's no... Therefore, over the generations, writing a commentary on Vedanta Sutra explicitly was not done. But this much I learned from my study of one of Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas. You're going to hear something more about it shortly. Jiva Goswami, anybody here that's new and doesn't know who is Jiva Goswami? Anybody doesn't know who is Jiva Goswami? Okay, you all know. He didn't, because Lord Chaitanya accepted Vyasa's Srimad Bhagavatam as the commentary in Vedanta Sutra and Sridhar Swami's commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. He didn't write a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, but he wrote a 6-part treatise on the whole of Srimad Bhagavatam, using the principle of, without stating which of the statements of Vedanta Sutra he was commenting on, he spoke the message and explained it, and then made reference to Srimad Bhagavatam and made reference to Sridhar Swami's commentary and other texts. You follow what I just said? He was writing a commentary on Vedanta Sutra without calling it that. By making a statement of some truth, a tattva, a truth, and then supporting the truth based on statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the truth that he was uttering is his understanding or rendering of Vedanta Sutra aphorisms, but just in his own Sanskrit language without using the Vedanta Sutra Sanskrit language. And then explaining or supporting it based upon Srimad Bhagavatam, and then further elaborations by other sources. So in essence, the Sandarbhas, because we're going to hear about the Sandarbha shortly, it's a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, but he didn't call it that, because he didn't step over Lord Chaitanya saying we don't need a commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. Because the Vedanta Sutra is the summation of all the Vedas. And the person who did write an official commentary on Vedanta Sutra with a very dramatic historical set of events was Baldeva Vidyabhushana. That's what Prabhupada is commenting on here in his dedication page to Baldeva. A little bit about Baldeva's life. Some of us will be going to Jagannath Puri for a yatra during the Kartik month. And north of Jagannath Puri is Ramuna. It's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita. When Lord Chaitanya was going to stay in Puri at the request of his mother, it's one of the places they passed through. There's some detailed pastimes of Lord Chaitanya that took place there in Ramuna. And very nearby, in a modest village, is the place where Baldeva was born. And he wasn't born in a Brahmana family, he was born in a merchant family. His father sent him to school when he was of school age. And when he completed his studies, the normal thing that would happen for a young boy like that is he'd come back and be trained up in his father's business and continue his father's business. But Baladev had a different inspiration, different vision of his life. He wanted to become not just a Sanskrit scholar and a learned person. He had this kind of, you could say, immature little boy's vision of himself that he wanted to be an acharya. And he had the acumen, he had the capacity. So when he finished school, he requested his father, I want to go find a teacher to teach me so I can become an acharya. And his father understood the seriousness of, and as well as his personality. So he gave his permission, and off young Baladev went, still very young, searching for a teacher, searching for a guru. He went to Puri because he's from Orissa and not far from Jagannath Puri. And he met learned persons, but he kept searching and searching, and eventually came to a Madhva Mat temple, an ashram, in Mysore, now Karnataka. And there he took shelter, received Diksha, received training in Vedanta Sutra according to the doctrine of Madhvacharya, and he became a fantastic scholar, not only in the teachings of Madhvacharya, but all the systems of the various systems of knowledge, even other systems, and how Madhva's system addresses the other ideas that are out there, and the whole thing, logic and debate, and the 6 philosophical doctrines, and he became an amazing young scholar. And the pride and joy of the ashram. However, he wasn't just interested in learning, he was interested in applying it. And so in applying it, he wanted to teach others who were eager to become students, and he wanted to engage in spreading the message by debate if necessary. So he learned all those skills. He requested, because he's from Orissa, he requested permission from the heads of the Mat, or ashram, to go to Puri and reside in Puri and worship Lord Jagannath. So they were reluctant to lose their best man, but they saw his determination and they gave their consent, and he went to Jagannath Puri. There he stayed at another Madhva Mat, because in Jagannath Puri everybody has something. And while he was there, residing in Puri, worshipping Lord Jagannath, he met a grand disciple of Rasikananda. His name was Radha Damodar Das. Now a little bit about Rasikananda. The samadhi of Rasikananda is found in the courtyard in the Ramuna temple, Chirakora Gopinath courtyard. Very amazing pastime. There's a book written about his life, Rasikananda, by Harisori's wife. She spent years researching to get it, correct, because there's a lot of generic stories that you can't verify, and so she was sifting through what you can verify. And he was very careful rendering of Rasikananda's life. And Rasikananda was a direct disciple of Shyamananda. Now that's another very interesting. We could spend an hour talking about Shyamananda. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Rupa and Sanatan, Jiva Goswami, disciplic succession. And then following Jiva Goswami, there were 3 principal students. He had many, but 3 principal ones. Srinivasacharya is commonly listed as next in the line, and contemporary with him were Narottam Das Thakur and Shyamananda. Shyamananda was the son of a king. He was a prince. He wasn't a Brahmana. He was a Kshatriya by birth, but by qualification he was superlative Vaishnav. And he was given the name Shyamananda by Radharani herself. It's a long story. So one of Shyamananda's principal disciples was Rasikananda, and his name was appropriate for his mood. He was a Rasika Bhakta, experiencing such ecstasy of love of God that he was all attractive. And he was a grahastha, and together, he and his wife, primarily in the place where they resided, they made thousands and thousands of disciples from the highest class down to the lowest class and everything in between. They were just very powerful, very merciful preachers. And a grand disciple of Rasikananda was Radha Damodar Das. So Radha Damodar Das and Baldeva met in Puri. And naturally, Radha Damodar wanted to share with him who is Lord Chaitanya and his teachings, same. Who is Lord Chaitanya, his life and his precepts, naturally. And his precepts were encoded in Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas. And he knew them. He knew them more than just like academically. He was very elevated personality. So Baladev was eager student. He wanted to hear. So they spent months, hours every day, assiduously going over the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami. And Baladev was really inspired. He understood that many of the teachings that are there in the Sandarbhas are quite similar, almost the same as Madhva's teachings. And there were some differences, and that those some differences were philosophical statements that justified Radha Krishna worship, as well as this super excellence of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan that's not found in Madhva's teachings. It's found in the scripture, but not emphasized in the same way in Madhva's teachings. A little story. He's now deceased, but there was a very senior elder sannyasi in Udupi that was regarded by everybody as, everyone looked up to him. This is during our lifetime. And some devotees that were visiting there, they visited annually and conducted some gatherings, and he started developing some appreciation for the qualities of the devotees and their enthusiasm for kirtan and their good manners and their etc., etc. So he wanted to, out of his own curiosity, he wanted to examine what are the teachings that are being followed by these devotees. So he invited a discussion, senior elder sannyasi, 10 questions on 10 topics, and said, what are your teachings on this and that, the other 10 topics? The devotee that was being interviewed this way similarly gave the essence in a short statement in English, and then the scriptural support for those teachings. May you one day have the privilege of representing Srila Prabhupada like that. And be able to convince a very senior learned sannyasi as that experience, that exchange was like. And at the end, he just went, almost the same. That was his little comment. Same, Baldeva understood, almost the same, with some differences. And important differences, but primarily the same as Madhva. Baladev requested Radha Damodar to give him Diksha. And Radha Damodar said, that's not possible. You've already received mantra. And once receiving mantra, you don't receive mantra again from a bona fide disciplic succession. But we can have a little ceremony where you formally accept the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and the shelter of Lord Chaitanya, and you can be considered his follower thereafter. So they did that. And under Radha Damodar's encouragement, go to Vrindavan. That's where the vitality of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was still vibrant, because at that time it had become less vibrant in Puri. And so he enthusiastically he started, but he made a little detour first. He went to Navadvip to meet the devotees there and discuss topics and see the places where Lord Chaitanya performed his pastimes and so forth. And they all encouraged him, hurry, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is quite elderly, we don't know how long he'll remain, go there quickly and take shelter of him. So he did. And when Baladev reached Vrindavan, he quickly met up with Vishwanath. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was very happy to see such a qualified student. Baladev explained his whole experience from childhood, etc. And meeting Radha Damodar and hearing the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami and the glories of Lord Chaitanya from him. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur agreed to become his teacher, to teach him Srimad Bhagavatam in its entirety as he had understood it from disciplic succession. And another Pitambar, a scholar in the Rasika literatures, because a lot of what the Goswamis had written, not that Vishwanath was not conversant in this subject, but he gave the assignment to someone else specifically. And they spent years together. And Baladev was writing, making translations of things and commentaries of things. And during that period of time, there was some turmoil that was developing in Jaipur. The turmoil had to do with, now we're going to go back in history. The Rajput kings were Vaishnavas. And during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he went to Vrindavan, the date given is 1512, which means, from our Western perspective, it's basically the time when the Europeans were trying to figure out if the world was round or flat. They sent Christopher Columbus in 3 boats to find a path to go to get spices from India, and otherwise he was going to fall off the edge of the flat earth. But he was convinced it was round. So while that was going on in Europe, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was exhibiting the highest ever seen stages of transcendental love of God. So in 1512 is when he went to Vrindavan. And when he went to Vrindavan, the places of Krishna's pastimes had been lost to the world. He established where was Radha Kund, and then spent 2 months going to different places. And when he returned back to Puri and on his way met Rupa and Sanatan, he gave them the assignment to go and continue his work, as well as to write transcendental literature. So they did that. And from that time, 1512, until around 150 years, the glory of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the followers of Lord Chaitanya, and the glories of Vrindavan were abundant. Including the building of fantastic temples and deity worship and teachings and strong influence of Lord Chaitanya and his followers. Then in 1668, Aurangzeb made a public decree. All Hindu temples and deities should be broken. And anybody that gets in the way, kill them or torture them, or both. And so it was panic time in Vrindavan. Although the glory was high, everyone became very afraid, and they went here and there. And so they turned to the Rajput Vaishnava kings. Then the capital was named Amber, not now the present Jaipur, but then Amber. And they requested protection from Aurangzeb. And so the following arrangement was made. The principal deities were taken to Radha Kund for a year, while in another fortified city and palace in the Mathura district, where the Rajput king actually ruled, a palace was built, or a place of worship was built for these deities, and then they shifted from Radhakund to that place. Forget the name. And they stayed there for 33 years. And then, you know how it goes in India. There was some intrigue. And the Mughals were continuing this, smash the temples and deities, but there were some Jats who were worse than the Mughals. And so the Rajput kings aligned themselves with the Mughals to hold down the Jats, which was a difficult straddling position because the Mughals wanted to destroy the temples and the deities. And then it was decided that this fortified place where the deities were, they should be moved again. So they were moved to Amber. And near Amber is a place now called Govindapur. That's where the deities went. And everything was fantastic except for the fact that there was some competition, spiritual competition, and that meant financial competition, which with the Ramanadis. Some of you from South India, you know that after Ramanujacharya left this world, there was a kind of schism between the South and the North Ramanuja followers. And the North group were called Ramanadis, named after this Ramananda. And Ramananda had a big following, and he disagreed with the other group without the detail. And 2 2 generations after him, one of his principal scholar acharya leaders, he moved to the Galta Valley not far from Amber, and he was living in a cave. And from that position, he met with the queen, and the queen became a Ramanadi follower, and her pious husband became persuaded by the queen to build a monastery for the Ramanadis. And that became the headquarters, like the capital of the northern Ramanujacharya follower group, the Ramanadis, not far from the capital of the Rajput king. So that king, and for 7 generations, they had this special privilege. Every financial need, every protection, everything, under the authority of the king, because they were Ram Bhaktas. But when this moving of Govindaji took place, it was being arranged by some generations later. Ram Singh moved from Vrindavan to Radhakund, to this other place, the name I can't remember, where Kaman is the name of the place. So then eventually to Govindapur. So that was Ram Singh, and he eventually died. He left this world. And his son Vishnu Singh followed shortly thereafter. So it left the 7-year-old boy to become the next king, a child king. That was installed, his position as king was installed by the Mughals. There was this bond of cooperation between them. So the Rajput king, they had to be very diplomatic, and they didn't want to get into this major war anyway. So there's Jai Singh, when as a 7-year-old boy, he had, before he became the king, the child king, he visited his father, who was looking after protecting the kingdom in the Mathura district. And he came to know about Krishna and saw deities of Krishna and became inspired, instead of as the 7 generations before him, as Ram Bhaktas, to become a Krishna Bhakta. And it was insight, but it was a wonderful event when Govindaji was then shifted to Govindapur, very, very near the capital of Amber. And that was nice for him, and it was nice for the citizens to see their king so happy. But the Ramanadis saw it as a confrontational situation developing, because they had enjoyed for generations the support of the king. And now there's competition over there. And so, you know what Brahmanas do when they feel there's competition sometimes? They made some issues. They brought some issues to this young, now still very young, Jai Singh, saying, who are these people anyway? What's their disciplic succession? What's their authority, for that matter, of even worshipping? Because if one does not receive mantra in disciplic succession, you can't worship the deity. There's no authority behind it. So Jai Singh didn't know the answer to that. He went to the Mahants that were doing the worship in Govindapur. And they wrote back in Sanskrit this very detailed explanation of our disciplic succession comes from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, and scriptural references and references establishing the authority of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Krishna himself. And that's sufficient. Disciplic succession means from Krishna. And the Ramanadis didn't buy it. because their reference, they had a different set of references. Theirs was Padma Purana that says there's 4 disciplic successions, and there's not 5. They didn't buy it. So they were unhappy because they wanted these people out of the way. There's competition. Get them out of the way. Do it that way, philosophically. And then it started escalating. And the escalation went to the manner of worship. The manner of worship was, whoever heard of Radha Krishna worship? In our tradition, it's Satyabhama Krishna, Rukmini Krishna. Where's Radha Krishna worship? Whoever heard of such a thing? By worshipping Radha Krishna, indirectly, you're supporting this illicit dealing between Krishna and an unmarried, someone who's married to somebody else. So it has to stop, and Radha should go into a separate altar. You can honor her, but then she goes into a separate altar. And then they had another one, and the other one was, how can they worship Krishna without first worshipping Narayan, then worshipping Krishna? They're doing things in an unbona fide manner. We should take over the worship of Govindaji, and Radharani's got to go to some other place. And here's this young king that's not, a scholar, and the weight of authority of the Ramanadis had been through the generations of his ancestors. So he's in a hot spot. So he turned to the Mahants, but they didn't have an answer, and then he started personally studying, because he had this sense that it's all rhetoric and there really aren't such big essential differences. So he started studying, the 4 Sampradayas teachings, and without all the list of the things that he read. And then he wrote his own little statement saying, they should be, get along peacefully. Something very similar to what Bhaktisiddhanta did in his mission. He wanted to see those differences and see the unity of the 4 Sampradayas. He wanted, in saying that Lord Chaitanya, this is Bhaktisiddhanta now, Lord Chaitanya's teachings unify the 4 Sampradayas. It's a long explanation. So that's what the king was attempting to do during his time. But the Ramanadis wouldn't have it. They, their competition. That was the motivation. And we want answers. So, meanwhile, back in Vrindavan, Vishwanath, around this time in his 60s, too old to go there and settle the thing, he called Baladev, his #1 student, and they had discussions. And he said to Baladev, they're questioning the authenticity of the Sampradaya of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he said, well, that's ridiculous, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the personality. Same thing that the Lohans had said they don't accept it. And they, as their authority, they cite this verse from Padma Purana, saying there's 4 Sampradayas, which ends in Utkal Purushottama. And they say that these 4 Sampradayas have mats, or temples, or places of worship, or seats of higher learning in Utkal. Utkal means Orissa, or Jagannath Puri. And Baladev said, I know the verse, and I know that that's how they read it. But what it means is, it's indicating Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would appear in Orissa, and he would unify the 4 Sampradayas. That's what it means. That's the reference, Utkal Purushottama. He's the essence and the summation of all the Sampradayas. So they spent weeks discussing, strategizing, and preparing for Baladev, along with one Brahmana, to go to Govindapur, see the deity of Govindaji, Is he okay? Are you okay? Is everything all right? Yes or no? Yes? Okay. So off they went. And they went, after seeing Govindaji, they went to see the king. The king arranged a little gathering. And he had to be fair. He can't be partial this way, that way. Although in his heart, he is Krishna Bhakta. He was leaning that way, but he has to be fair. And there's his ancestors, it's difficult. So he said, they have some issues about the Gaudiyas. And would you like to speak and address those concerns? He said, yes. So then he called upon the Ramanadis, and the first missile they fired is, what's your disciplic succession? There's only 4. And he said, I'm initiated in Madhva's line. I stayed at the Madhva Math and I received mantra from them. Later I traveled and received teachings from Radha Damodar Das and Vishwanath, so I also accept them as gurus. And they didn't know what to say about that one. Okay, well, you're authorized, but all the others are not authorized. And then he said, here's a text. It was like, here, a copy of Gora Godadesh Dipika, written by one of the Gaudiya followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that gives details of the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and how it connects with Madhva. So they wanted to study it. And then they brought up their other concerns, the worship of Krishna without going first to worship Narayana, and then having Radha on the altar. So if you're going to say you're from the Madhva line, then everything that you do should be according to Madhva's teachings. And you're doing things that are not according to Madhva's teachings. He said, well, there is a commentary that I will need to supply you with commentary on Vedanta Sutra that explains it all. He said, very well, let's have it. He said, well, I'll have to write it first. And can you please give me some time? And before they got a chance to respond, the king said, you'll have some time. So now, anybody that's written something philosophical, even if you just write a letter to your spiritual master or write a Vyasa Puja homage, how long does it take? How long does it take? What to speak of something that's going to represent for posterity for thousands of years? Something that's profound philosophy, explanation of Vedanta Sutra, my God. So there are different biographies. Some say took a week. Some say it took a month. He left the capital of the king and went to where Govinda was and paid his obeisances and praying and praying and praying and day and night and day, praying and writing and writing and praying. They probably took a couple of naps and some prasadam, but he just was so focused, like Vyasadeva compiling Mahabharata and having Ganesha as a scribe, except he didn't have a scribe. He had to do it himself. And eventually he brought the commentary, whether it was a week or 30 days, whichever it was. And so the gathering was there, again, this time in Galta, in the valley where the Ramanadis were, and he handed them the commentary. And they said, we want to examine it, and they started examining. And the history goes like this. I don't know if you're aware. Vedanta Sutra has 4 parts. And the first 2 are dealing with Sambandha Gyan, knowledge of the relationship of everything with the source. The second one is Abhideya, the acting in that relationship. And the final one is the goal, prayojana. So he said in the third part, in verses 40 to 42, that's where you're going to find what you're looking for. Just reference it immediately. Because this explains your criticism that Radharani has no business being by the side of Krishna. But according to the teachings of Vyasa in Vedanta Sutra and his other essential writings, the Shakti of the personality of Godhead is eternal and is eternally in his association. So whether the Leela is Swakiya or Parkiya, she has to be by his side. And you'll find the answer there in support of our worship. And then this other reference in text 43, you have this notion that says you have to worship Narayan first. But there's statements that say, in the positive sense, that all the different forms of Narayan are equally worshipable, and there's no statement that says you have to worship Narayan first. You may have that practice, but it's not a mandated requirement according to Scripture. So they were speechless. And the king gave them some time to go over the manuscript, or the Govinda Bhashya, so they wanted to know who wrote this. He said, Govinda wrote it. I just wrote it down. I was the scribe. He gave me instructions according to the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and my other teachers. So when there was silence from the other side, then the king pronounced, then the authenticity of the Sampradaya is now established, and the authenticity of the teachings of the Sampradaya is now established, and Radharani goes back on the altar. Oh, because apparently it happened. What a horrible thing. Remove Radharani from the altar. So Radharani went back by the side of Govindaji, where she belongs. And the generations continued thereafter. So after some time, now Jai Singh is a little bit older, and he made an arrangement for the deities to move to a temporary residence for 2 years, something like that, in Jai Nivas Garden, very humbly named after himself, in this new capital called, humbly named after himself, Jaipur. And meanwhile, he was having this permanent establishment in the courtyard of the royal palace, for where Govindaji would be front and center, because that was his devotion, now fully authorized by the mercy of Baldeva Vidyabhushana. And so Baldeva Vidyabhushana went back to Vrindavan and continued his work of serving Lord Chaitanya, particularly writing commentaries on things. One of them I happen to know, and that is he wrote a commentary on Tattva Sandarbha by Jiva Goswami. And it's that Tattva Sandarbha commentary that primarily Gopi Pranadhana relied upon to write his Tattva Sandarbha text. In Bhanu Swami's translation, he just makes a direct translation of Baldeva Vidyabhusana's commentary without extending it further. So he was prolific. He was young and empowered. Like Jiva Goswami, he was also very young when he went to Vrindavan. And he wrote many, many, many. So the many, many, many writings of Baladev are so valuable to us, no circling back around. One of the commentaries he wrote was a commentary on Bhagavad Gita, that we're indebted very much to him for his commentary, because of his commentary we're all here. Prabhupada came to the West. Not to say he wouldn't have come without it, but he came to the West, and here we are. Compliments of Baldeva Vidyabhushana. So yesterday was his disappearance day, and this evening I want to speak something about Ganga Mata Goswamini, and maybe we'll touch on a little bit, I think time will permit, the Pandava Nirjala Ekadasi, and what's the special thing about Pandava Nirjala Ekadasi. So any discussion? Comments? Yes?
Our sampradaya is called Brahma Gaudiya
Yes.
Sampradaya. Right?
Yes.
So the linkage to Madhva Sampradaya is through Baldeva Vidyabhushana. Is that the way?
No. The linkage to the Madhva Sampradaya is through Madhavendra Puri, Ishwar Puri, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He just wrote the commentary that explains in a comprehensive manner the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Does that answer your question?
The writing of the two philosophies, how they join together. I mean, it's one and the same is done there.
Well, it formalized in the worldview that this is an authentic sampradaya, or a branch of sampradaya, because they have a comprehensive commentary in Vedanta Sutra. Now, it wasn't needed except for other people that were feeling it was needed. On what authority do you do this and that, the other thing? So there has to be some scriptural comprehensive picture commenting on Vedanta Sutra according to the ways of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers. So that was his service. Did that answer?
This Vyavasayatmika Buddhi was commentary, Baldeva Vidyabhushana. He says, like, let the world be created or annihilated. My only business is to execute the order of the spiritual master. But we also hear in the 10 offenses, which is from Padma Purana, that spiritual master's order should be followed. So, and Baldeva Vidyabhushana is mentioning from Padma Purana this commentary.
He's mentioning what commentary from Padma Purana?
Commentary to this.
It was his explanation. Acharyas are permitted. And then when he makes some statement, then it has to be supported. That's what acharyas do. Okay. So what's next? It's Nirjala Ekadasi. I'm sure some prasadam was prepared. So maybe we'll just break and let everybody take prasadam. Who wants to take prasadam? Srila Prabhupada ki jai.